Earth once coexisted with several other dimensions, until one day when Mordred and his alliance emerged. Now, a group of heroes using the power of the dimensional blades must defeat Mordred before it's too late. This isn't a summary of a TV show, it's just how I would adapt Kamen Rider Saber. Hey guys, it is I, Kuroninja, and today I'm going to be talking about how I would adapt Kamen Rider Saber. Now, Kamen Rider Saber is a divisive season. There's some who didn't like it at first, but then changed their mind after episode 16. There's some who think it's just okay. And then there's those who think it's just as bad as Kamen Rider Ghost. I'm not going to give my thoughts on Kamen Rider Saber because I didn't even finish it, but I'm still going to see if I can adapt it into something. So now that the intro is out of the way, this is how I would adopt Kamen Rider Saber. Okay, so first we've got to set things up. The main protagonist is going to be someone who likes reading. Unlike other people, I care more about the side characters than the main character, so I apologize if the protagonist has as much depth as the Megaforce Rangers. Anyway, one day he returns a book to the library, but then he sees this small mysterious book which he decides to borrow. This catches the attention of someone else in the library. Now here's the part where we talk about the villains. The main villain is Mordred, a sorcerer from another dimension who wants to rewrite the world in his own image using an artifact called the Book of Creation. But he can't write anything in the Book of Creation unless he has enough dimensional essence in its purest form, which appears when a gateway between two dimensions is created. And so what Mordred does is he opens gateways using dimension books, and these dimension books let him summon followers. Mordred has also formed alliances with powerful beings from other dimensions who also know how to use dimension books. One of those is the mysterious swordsman of darkness, who we'll get to later. Anyway, the protagonist ends up running into one of these monsters that was summoned, but then a sword appears in his hands. This is a sword of flames, which allows him to use dimension books of his own and transform into Dimension Rider Dragon Knight. Yeah, I know there's already a Kamen Rider Dragon Knight, but the name of my idea for an adaptation is Dimension Riders, not Dimension Rider Dragon Knight. Anyway, the guy who followed the protagonist from the library is none other than Dimension Rider Lion Knight, who wields the Sword of Currents. He is part of a group known as the Dimension Riders, whose goal is to use the power of the dimensional swords and the dimension books to defeat Mordred. The other members of the Dimension Riders include Dimension Rider Smash, who uses the Sword of Stone, Dimension Rider Gale, who uses the Sword of Wind, and Dimension Rider Echo, who uses the Sword of Sound. They used to have another member, Dimension Rider Dark Dragon, who uses the Sword of Darkness, but he betrayed the group and joined forces with Mordred as the Swordsman of Darkness. In one of the first few episodes, probably the fifth one, Dimension Rider Dragon Knight is joined by Dimension Rider Golden Knight, who uses the Sword of Lightning. Golden Knight is a member of a special operation that was created to investigate the mysterious dimensional gateways appearing all over the place. He also reports to another agent named Ashley, but we won't talk about her yet. Now, throughout this first arc, Dimension Rider Dark Dragon appears and fights against the Dimension Riders regularly, especially Dragon Knight and Golden Knight, but he has also hired the services of an interdimensional bounty hunter named Cerberus to deal with the other Dimension Riders. Anyway, the arc ends when during a fight between Dark Dragon and Golden Knight, Dimension Rider Golden Knight is sent to the Shadow Realm. Dragon Knight then defeats Dark Dragon with a new power-up, but then it's revealed that he found out that someone else betrayed the Dimension Riders and joined forces with Mordred. But before Dimension Rider Dark Dragon can say who it is though, he is killed by Cerberus, who has decided to collect the Dimension Swords for himself. But the Sword of Darkness vanishes. And then when Dragon Knight returns, he finds out that the Dimension Riders have turned against him because they think he's working for Mordred. And now it's time for the second arc. In this arc, most of the dimension gates have been opened, causing dimensional energy to enter people's minds. Mordred then realizes that he can use this dimensional energy to summon even more powerful monsters, and at the same time, the Dimension Riders, now forming an alliance with the Special Operations team that Dimension Rider Golden Knight was working for, they have all been given a mission to find a Dimension Rider named the Swordsman of Radiant Action, who has recently made an appearance on Earth. Meanwhile, our protagonist runs into a mysterious person named Sora, who later reveals himself as the swordsman of Radiant Action. Sora transforms into Dimension Rider Sora, who uses the Sword of Radiant Action, and he also looks like me. Later, Mordred and his generals combine their powers to summon their most powerful monster, Charybdis, who has destroyed many other dimensions before. Charybdis almost defeats Dimension Rider Dragon Knight, but then the leader of the Special Operations team gives him a dimension book that channels energy from the mysterious Lost Dimension. However, the power of the Lost Dimension makes Dragon Knight go berserk. Okay, so the script for this video is already longer than I thought it would be, so I'll just go through the rest of my ideas for a Kamen Rider Saber adaptation very quickly. In the third arc, it's revealed that the leader of the Special Operations team has formed an alliance with Mordred the whole time. However, he intends to keep the power of the Book of Creation for himself, and joining him is Ashley, who later uses the Sword of Vapor to transform into Dimension Rider Ash, and Agent Richard, who transforms into Dimension Rider Tide with the Sword of Time. Dimension Rider Dragon Knight travels into the Lost Dimension and makes peace with its only resident, the Lost Dragon, to unlock the power of the Elemental Dragon. At the same time, the former Dimension Rider Golden Knight returns from the Shadow Realm as the new Dimension Rider Dark Dragon, this time with the goal of sealing away every Dimension Sword. After his two generals are defeated by Dimension Rider Dragon Knight and Dimension Rider Lion Knight, Mordred unseals an ancient warrior known as Dimension Rider Demon Knight to fight the Dimension Riders. Demon Knight uses the Sword of the Void, which doesn't count as a Dimension Sword for some reason, and Dimension Rider Demon Knight doesn't really last long, and Cerberus takes the Sword of the Void for himself. The leader of the Special Operations team later transforms into Dimension Rider Omniforce using the power of the Book of Creation, but it's only a fraction of the Book of Creation's power, and at the same time, the Dimension Swords are all unsealed and Dimension Rider Golden Knight is back. Dimension Rider Dragon Knight combines the power of all the Dimension Swords to unlock his final form, Dimension Rider Galaxy Knight. Using this new power, he defeats Dimension Rider Omniforce, but then, to begin the final arc, Dimension Rider Omniforce is killed by Mordred, who uses his power to become a Dimension Rider himself, known as Dimension Rider Megiddo. But all the Dimension Riders manage to work together and defeat Dimension Rider Megiddo once and for all. I don't know how they do it though, because I didn't finish watching Kamen Rider Saber. Okay, so I think I did a good job explaining how I would adapt Kamen Rider Saber. It's very hard to think of adaptation names for the different riders, especially Kamen Rider Saber. The only name I could think of was Kamen Rider Dragon Knight, but the good thing about my adaptation is that I named it Dimension Riders after the entire team of riders. I know that there was also a lot of people comparing Kamen Rider to Super Sentai, which is another reason why I would name an adaptation of Kamen Rider Saber after the whole team of riders and not just the main character. Also, another thing I would like to do if I adapted Kamen Rider Saber is have another female rider as part of the cast, which is like what they do in Power Rangers. Kamen Rider Sabala was okay, but her character was better as a villain. Now, if I would choose a Kamen Rider and Kamen Rider Saber to adapt into another female rider in my adaptation, it will probably be Kamen Rider Kenzan. Also, there's a few things from Kamen Rider Saber that I probably won't adapt, like that power-up that Kamen Rider Saber only used in 5 episodes. I think it was called King Excalibur or something. And I also won't be adapting anything from the movies or Superhero Senki because I didn't watch them. Anyway, that is all for this video. If you enjoyed, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And remember, I have nothing to do with Kuroninja.